Let us know who you are. I know there's some people I've talked to before in person. Um, and other people we've only contacted over Instagram, and then other people on it's a brand new meeting. So feel free to just take the floor if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey, Dale and everyone. My name is Matt Huber. I am a mix engineer here in LA. And yeah, just excited to learn and learn from this whole process. Very, very excited about it as the topic at hand is obviously something that mix engineers have to be thinking about quite a bit as well. So thank you so much for doing this, Dale.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you, Matt.
I'll go
Hey,
next. What's up, everybody? My name is Jeff. I'm based in LA. Yeah, I appreciate you, Dale, for putting on the town hall meeting to discuss everything. So,
Hey, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, Jeff.
what's up, y'all? I'm Matt Teden. I'm also a mixer here in Los Angeles, working at Glenwood Place Studios right now. Um, and yeah, I am just curious at kind of peeling back the curtain on this whole thing. I like the idea of like you had mentioned in your Instagram video, kind of sourcing a lot of data from people who um, have masters, and then you can directly compare it to what actually hits the streaming services. I think that kind of um, doing data analysis that way is a cool way of going about this. So yeah, Dale, thank you for putting this together.
My pleasure.
Hey, what's up? This is Taylor. I'm from Los Angeles, recording and mixing engineer, and audio accountability. Let's go. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Rob, mastering engineer from Nashville. I also have a background in software, so I was kind of curious about what you had going on. So, thanks for putting this together, Dale.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I love the hat.
Thanks.
Did anyone see the video of the guy who went swimming naked in the Bass Pro Shops tub there?
Yeah, that was not me.
All right, good, good. Um, I think that we have a few people joining who haven't unmuted or whatever. Maybe give it another minute or second. Uh, minute or second. Um, I I'm really glad everyone took an interest in this. I just it's been obviously like I get an email about this very topic every day, and um it's always the same question. I might as well just get into it because I have some stuff written here. I'm gonna just share my notes with y'all. Um Wait, do you guys see the whiteboard? Do you have access to my whiteboard, whatever that is?
Yep.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we can.
Awesome. If you want to follow along, I wrote some stuff here because otherwise I'll just speak in circles and no one needs that in their life. I'm going to try to keep this, do a little intro of what I know and what I've discussed and my experiences. And then I'm just going to keep live notes on anything anyone else wants to add for the moment. Um, uh, so as you guys know, guys and girls know, um, uh, I wanted to start audio accountability. Just it's a collective of people, a collective of us music professionals. I'm just going to read through this for those of you who haven't seen the website or the Instagram. Committed to mastering innovation in the audio arts, we seek to analyze and demystify audio from the recording process through release and beyond. And our first objective, and this isn't the only objective, but is to compile a comprehensive pool of knowledge related to music streaming with an emphasis on sonic fidelity and normalization loudness processes. Cutting through the misinformation widely available on the internet, we can better understand what we are hearing, why we are hearing it, and what can be done to reach for a more equitable and high fidelity future in the music marketplace. After the start of the audio accountability Instagram page, I got more than a few calls from friends and colleagues, and they're like, "Dale, what is this? What makes you why are you doing this? What makes you the, the expert to be able to, tackle this, or what are you doing? I don't understand, and, and I also got some friends who were just wanted to know, like Rory called me and he was just like, I just genuinely want to know what you're doing and I'd love to help. So I got it from, there's a lot of people just kind of like, what's going on? What's going on? And first of all, I'm only an expert insofar as I've done a lot of work, as have a lot of you. Here, I'm going to let some people in the room. I am not an expert. I only have, I have what expertise I have, and all of you carry expertise and experience, and I didn't want not having a certain kind of background to limit me from just pulling together some friends and trying to look into something that I know, look into many things, but this first thing that I know really affects us all. This, the streaming loudness. Current goals of audio accountability, and you know, these can change over time, but currently I'm thinking community and interaction, getting us out of our studio caves and onto a Zoom call, is an end in itself. Seeing each other's faces, relating experiences, talking to each other and trying to solve problems is great. We can all elevate our own games collectively with more community. Second goal I put down is just inspiring engineers to take ownership over the quality control once their work is streaming. A lot of people don't go beyond, it doesn't sound good on Spotify, or why is it low? A lot of people are worried, including myself. Sometimes I worry about going and looking at Spotify, recording the stream, and then actually calculating what's going on. It's a scary thing, especially if everyone's happy, to really go in and um, find out what your music's streaming at. What does it sound like through the Spotify codec? When everyone's happy, those are questions you don't necessarily want to, pick at those things, opening up Pandora's box, so to speak. But that's why we're going to keep most of the data, probably anonymous. Although we'll publish data, we'll probably keep a lot of it anonymous in cases where people don't want to cause any issues with things that are streaming and everyone's happy with. So, I want to develop a centralized place where relevant and easily digestible information can be found about audio. So once we develop all these things, I'm hoping to have a place where all the mastering engineers, all the mixing engineers, instead of having to write the 1000th email about why your music sounds quiet on Spotify, I think it would be awesome to have a place, a link to send people to, in a little, not that we're disinterested in, but like, hey, this is a great link to read, as opposed to, hey, go on the internet and search it. There's so many problems that can be alleviated by people not going and searching, why is my music low on Spotify right now? That it creates way more confusion and way more problems than it does provide answers. Moving on, although Spotify loudnesses are current and first thing to investigate, it'll hopefully not end there. We can future community endeavors, as you can see on the whiteboard for our new additions into the room. Go to the whiteboard. We're just talking it through. I would love to talk about streaming codec quality with an emphasis in sample rate considerations. Right now, they're telling you, hey, you can upload your music at 96K. But one thing I'll tell you is that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make it sound better once it's been live sample rate converted to 44.1 and then streaming with mad amounts of distortion on Spotify. So I would love to look into that in the future. Atmos mixing and mastering. There's a lot of things that we could provide, a lot of tests we can do, experiences we can relate to really, elevate the community in that respect. I'd love to do community deep dives into certain plugins, comparisons of and feature set explorations between like common limiters, like take all of us and just go in for 2 hours and kind of, I won't mind doing this, and hopefully you don't mind doing this. Just kind of like divulging our little secrets. For the sake of, you know, if I give you a secret, you give me a secret, maybe we can both elevate our game. I would love to curate reference playlists for community use. You know, hey, this playlist on Tidal is a great thing to reference if you're trying to master a loud song or mix in a certain style. Lastly, the last thing that came to mind today when I was preparing for this is just publishing of opinion review articles for our community on our website. You know, a lot of people have opinions, and as long as they come from a place that's trying to add to the community and not tear each other down, I would love to have good opinion, you know, opinion pieces on our website. And with that being said, everything we're doing here, I just always want to remain clear. I'm not trying to tear anyone down or one up Spotify. I'm not even trying to get Spotify to change at this point. Because I know, I mean, it took iTunes over 10 years to put up credits, you know, so I know how long these things take. So I'm not like going, let's storm the castle. I just want to be able to have us to know what's going on and have the data so that we can know how to better do our jobs at this point. If we can at least know what's going on and what is, we can begin to affect, you know, we can begin to affect change in our own workflows, as well as provide better information. And then hopefully, you know, maybe if we do something cool together, maybe we'll have a bigger platform to be able to affect change, even in a behemoth as big as Spotify. The last thing I want to say in the introduction is information that and data that we gather for now and the foreseeable future, it may not be forever, will be publicly available to anyone to reference and to use to their own ends. So anything that is provided, I'm going to put it on anything that's provided and constructive to what we are doing, I will provide it on the website or through whatever. And the community, if you take something you learned in one of our things and you build something cool and you make $1 million, you know, more power to you. This is not where there's not some, you know, we're not doing like secretive, you know, you can't do anything with this data. Like, this is everything that's so don't share something you don't want others to not know. Okay. If you accidentally share something, let me know immediately and I'll do my best to, you know, scrub it. Does anyone have any questions or anything before I move forward? Is this platform working for everyone?
So far, so good.
Sweet. If you want me to shut up at any point or want to interject, just raise your hand or something. I don't know. This is very informal. So the first thing that I wanted to do, and I'm going to try to make this quick, so we're not all, you know, I know dinner time's approaching. So currently, Spotify normalization, their purported methodology on their website, and I provided it's on this down here. If you want to look, this Spotify, this is where I found this information. I'm sure everyone's seen this. I'm sure everyone's seen this web page on Spotify, but this is where I got this information. And this is what they say. They say tracks are adjusted when normalization is engaged in normal settings. Tracks are adjusted to -14 LUFS based on the ITU 1770 standard. Anything below 14 LUFS is turned up to -14 as long as the -1 true peak ceiling is not breached. So if you have a -20 track and you have 6 dB of 7 dB of headroom, it'll turn it up to -14, but it will not. If you're -20 with a -1 peak, it's not going to turn it up because it doesn't want to cause distortion. Anything, of course, that doesn't really apply to most of us. Most of us are above -14, and they say they turn all the masters down that are above -14 to above to -14, and they recommend a true peak ceiling of -1. Unless it's above -14, they recommend a true peak ceiling of -2, which is a huge, in my experience is a huge, huge ceiling. But that being said, I understand what they're saying. They don't want their codec to cause, if you have a -7 master that has no ceiling headroom, they don't want to cause undue codec distortion during the codec conversion process. So they're just trying to limit distortion, but this can be a very this methodology, given to the wrong person who doesn't have enough context, this can be a very confusing set of standards. My personal experience, and pardon the unedited notes, I just kind of flew through this earlier. Basing normalization solely off the ITU 1770 standard with an integrated loudness does not lead to a unified loudness result. So the whole point of normalization is to make music sound different kinds of songs from different places all sound relatively the same volume, and the way it's being done, it does not do that. It does not create a unified loudness result. Because integrated loudness is one simple loudness average, it undercompensates loudness on less dense tracks, such as acoustic songs, and overcompensates the loudness on denser tracks. So an acoustic track that has a -10 LUFS integrated loudness might have the same apparent loudness as a fully produced dance track that has a -7.5 integrated loudness, because the acoustic song has no big transients, it has no giant Moog sub-bass, and so its apparent loudness is the same because of the lack of density. And if both of these tracks that are the same apparent loudness, even though they have different integrated loudnesses, are turned down to the -14 standard, the acoustic track will end up being 2.5 dB louder than the dance track. And this is all over Spotify. So I hope that makes sense. Feel free to DM me if you need a further explanation on that. Make sure no one, all right, let them in the room. All right. The next thing is, because integrated loudness is one simple loudness average, it does not take into account the internal dynamics, which can have a huge, huge impact on the final normalized volume. A loud dance track that has the same driving dynamic the whole time, where every section is relatively the same loudness, and we'll just like a song that just goes hard the whole time. The beat comes in at the top and it never stops. The loudness throughout will be -7, so the whole song, because it doesn't really change, has a -7 average. A similar track which has open sections in between. Pascal, what's up?
Sorry, I was just Eric Bard has a question.
Oh yeah.
Hey, I'm just wondering, when you say integrated loudness, how are you calculating that? Like, is that LUFS for, like, when I just judge a track's loudness, I'm normally looking at like the loudest chorus or something at the end, and I'm looking at what's the LUFS of that section, and like what's integrated loudness.
So it's a great question. So that's part of the issue, is that integrated loudness is one average score for the whole song. So if you put a LUFS meter, integrate in, any meter, you put it in your Pro Tools session and you press play at the beginning of the track and you play it all the way through after resetting the meter, it will give you the average loudness for that song. Another easy way of doing it that we're going to be utilizing for the coming tests will be to drop your mix into RX and open up the
Gotcha. I know the
specification.
loudness thing. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and so it's basically giving you one score for the whole song, which isn't necessarily indicative. This is the exact and this leads to the point that I'm making, is that if a song is loud the whole time, it's going to have a higher integrated loudness than a song that has soft sections and loud sections. Even though the loud sections are the same volume, if there are soft sections in a song, say 50% of the time due to, acoustic guitar vocal in the first part, and then it comes down for the second chorus and the beginning of the bridge, the average volume is going to be lower than a song that goes hard all the time, even though they're the same apparent volume. So giving my main gripe about this. Not that we're not griping engineers, but I'll say my main comment on the shortcoming of the current state is that we don't take one kind of dumb score for the whole song really doesn't give us the whole picture, and therefore leads to unequal loudness. So oftentimes what the experience will be, a rock band will release a song that's loud the whole time, and then they'll wonder why they're so quiet on Spotify. And the reason is because the song's loud the whole time, so the average loudness is high. And so Spotify turns it down more to meet the -14. Whereas if that rock band had put in softer sections, though, it would lower the average of that song and then be turned down less as a result. And we'll any way I can clarify this better, and all this to say, like, this is a community, so any questions like that for me to help clarify and for us to create better language to communicate this, is more than welcome. So thank you for your question. Furthermore, to game the Spotify system, people have been mixing anti-dynamically and with tons of harshness to gain apparent loudness. So, let's say, I'm sure we've all heard an overcompressed mix where it's an acoustic guitar and a vocal in the beginning and it's loud as hell. You know, it's just the hottest, loudest acoustic guitar vocal you've ever heard. And then when the drums come in on the first chorus, the volume drops 3 dB. This is something people have been doing to gain attention of Spotify listeners right at the top, because you can get away with this huge push. You know, the rest of the song is like 3 dB quieter than the intro. You know, so these sort of averages have inspired people just to get people's attention to mix anti-dynamically, just to get, you know, for good reason, like they want to gain people's attention. Also, mixing super aggressively in terms of loudness and saturation, not that those are necessarily bad things, but like really going overboard just to get your stuff to pop on Spotify is something people have been doing. My last thing that I'll relate in terms of my experiences is that when I go and measure Spotify streams, and I'll relay how I've been doing this. When I go and actually measure the streams, they're never -14 on the dot. I had a client who was concerned about the level of his album. Sure enough, I was clicking, I'm like, it's pretty close. But when you actually, I print the album out, I capture it digitally. When I measure his album, which should be -14, sure enough, it was -15.1. And I'm sure once you dive into check your own projects, you'll find that it varies a lot. And I want to kind of find out the reason as a community why it varies. I've seen singles that have varied up to 0.7 dB, which 0.7 dB in the streaming loudness world, that's huge. It's very huge. And I'll just note right here, this isn't in my notes, because I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to, you know, talk trash about anyone, but everyone goes to this loudnesspenalty.com, and I love the inspiration behind it. I love what it's trying to do. It's trying to help people. But the problem is people go to loudnesspenalty.com and they fail to read that the results are within plus or minus 1 decibel. So when it gives you how much you're going to be loudness penalized on Spotify, it's plus or minus a dB, which is a 2 dB window is far too wide. That's like 10x what we need as engineers to be able to know what it's going to be on Spotify. So that's part of the misinformation I'm talking about, is that, you know, people are going and like, I'm going to be loudness penalized. Even the idea of a loudness penalty it's not a proper word, because no one's getting penalized. Everything's just getting turned down to -14.0. You know, it's not a penalty. Everyone's getting turned down to that. So just I would love to over time recraft words that actually mean what we're saying, to clear confusion. The last thing I just want to see, and I apologize if this is if people have seen this, but current Spotify mastering recommendations is that the target loudness of your master to be at -14 integrated LUFS and keep it below -1 true peak. This is best for lossy formats and make sure there's no extra distortion introduced in the transcoding process. If your master's louder than -14 integrated LUFS, make sure it stays below 2 dB true peak to avoid extra distortion. This is because louder tracks are more susceptible to extra distortion in the transcoding process. This is all true, in a sense. They're from the Spotify engineer mentality, being from where they are, the way they're looking at things, they are trying to limit distortion. But -14, I don't know if you've ever heard a pop hit or a hot Billboard Hot 100 song at -14, but I haven't. And the sound of density and compression and some saturation are a part of the sound of modern music. And in many cases, a song mixed at -14 will not have the saturation or glue our ears have come to expect in a pop song, nor the energy, nor the intensity, nor the smack. And a lot of people see the -14 recommendation of the normalization of Spotify's normalization, and they're like, well, I'll just mix it -14. There's a couple problems with that. It's not going to have, like I said, the glue intensity. Other problem is that not all Spotify streaming venues are normalized. While normalization is on by default for listeners, it can be turned off. Number one, most studios I go into, Spotify normalization is off. Furthermore, other platforms such as streaming to smart TVs do not have normalization as an option at all, which should scare people who have released music at -14 due to Spotify standards. Because if you're -14, if you were trying to be a good audio person and you were like, I'm going to release this music like Spotify tells me to, your -14 master is going to be 765 dB quieter than everything else in any case where normalization is not engaged. And so if someone's playing your music, if someone has smart TV playing Spotify, your song comes on, it'll be barely hearable, at normal listening volumes. People will be like, what? This is broken, next song. I will say, Pascal, please go ahead.
Just so people know, if you click on reactions on the bottom of Zoom, you could raise your hand. But Matt Huber has a question, that just to make it easier for you, Dale.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't see that. I'm going to try to get a larger participant window. There we go. All right. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, not to interrupt, I apologize. It's all on topic though. I don't want to go too far off the beaten path, so you can keep your answer succinct if you want to. The first question I had is in regards to true peak and the ceiling, and their stated goal of avoiding codec distortion. Do you find that to be, when mastering, do you find that to be a real concern in terms of like avoiding codec distortion, or not so much?
Not so much, and this is only because Spotify's streaming quality is probably one of the lowest, at least to my ears. I'm not sure everyone else's recommend. Maybe it's something we can dive into later, but Spotify's stream quality is so low already that the codec distortion is like the last thing on my mind. I'm thinking, why does this sound so murky? Why does this sound so distorted already? Like, why it already feels distorted. I don't know how much of that is codec distortion, what's not. I'm certain that if you gave it 1 or 2 dB true peak, it would help with the codec distortion. but to me, it's kind of like the least of my concerns. I do wonder, and this is something I've been looking into if providing Spotify labels have asked me for this before, where we do sort of an Apple Digital Master or MFIT for Spotify that provides Spotify with a little bit more. I already have a little bit of a ceiling, but I'll provide like an extra half dB. I find that that helps. But also you're giving away a half dB in non-normalized situations. So,
Right.
if that makes sense. Has it in
Absolutely.
your experience?
I honestly have not done any like specific tests on it. So
Well, this will
why I
be
was
a
asking
good
you.
opportunity to like. I would love to. Part of the things that I do want to do, and I'll note this, is that one of the things we should be watching for when we look at our own masters versus what's on Spotify, is we can see what was true peak limited and at what
Mhm.
with and it does matter true peak limited, but it also matters with what final limiter, because true peak limiting varies from manufacturer to manufacturer. Because true peak isn't actually a true peak at all. Never mind. I won't go into that, but it's
Yeah.
a, it's more of an idea. We can see what was true peak limited, what was not, with what limiter at what ceiling, and
Ceiling.
what is doing better on Spotify.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be super interesting. My second question is in terms of the discrepancy, some things not being normalized all the way up to -14, not to be conspiracy theorist or anything, but do you get any sense that there is any sort of like backdoor dealings on that, or is that just a totally ridiculous rabbit trail?
I don't think it's ridiculous. There are times, and right now I will chalk it up as good citizens to maybe a mistake in the algorithm. But as we know, I mean, I could imagine a world where people do pay for their stuff to be juiced. Been done before. Um, you know,
Right.
it's been done before. I don't want to. Uh, I think we'll say it's possible. It's certainly possible. I have had people flat out say that that's the case, and they know it for a fact. I'm having not experienced those boardroom meetings myself. I'm an agnostic, but it's definitely a possibility. Um, but that being said, it also could be some sort of technical. But why is it always that same artist who always benefits from the extra juice on New Music Friday? I don't know. Um, I will say this, before I move on, is that a decent answer for your question?
Amazing. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Dale.
thank you. I will note that I mentioned Rory from Nomograph, excellent mastering engineer, a guy who I respect to I mean, I hold him in very high regard. He mentioned that he um really notices it really matters what the quality of your arrangement does play a huge part. And so when a circuit or Max Martin track comes on and these guys have just refined their skill to get things to pop on iPhone speakers and get as much energy as across in an arrangement as possible. He was mentioning that that plays probably the biggest part, which I would probably agree with. Um, you know, in terms of what our ears hear for apparent loudness. So, sometimes if you have like a really murky, dark, vibey, track versus a Max Martin track, the Max Martin track just blows it away on Spotify, even though they might be the same integrated loudness or whatever. So I do want to mention that, and I did have that in my notes. I think it's, sometimes when we hear that Nicki Minaj song or whatever that always comes on New Music Friday and always just blows everyone away, part of us in our needing to be, just realist, part of it could just be that producer just knows how to get things to slap, on Spotify. The other, and then the more conspiratorial mindset is like, I wonder if they had any help, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with asking that question, and it being a possibility, for sure. Um, Lastly, before we go into questions, I got a raised hand.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's
You
quite all
just
right.
hit on a question. So that's kind of my biggest question is we're talking about apparent loudness and perceived loudness, and it's really content specific in terms of what the meter's showing, and what we're seeing versus what we're hearing and feeling with the song. So how do you sort of approach, I guess, combating that in a way? Because there's things that are going on, in the higher frequency range that you don't hear, but it still affects the meter.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of along the same lines of what you're getting at, whereas they sort of have the right formula of the frequency response that it hits the Spotify encoder just properly enough to have it be loud and banging. We have tools, like I use Fat Filter a lot, and you could freeze the frequency response graph, and it shows you over a certain amount of time what's going on. Is that sort of like a good metric to base it off of? Because again, there's just stuff that's going on that you don't hear, but still it affects the integrated loudness.
Yes. Um, I would say that's definitely one way about it. I've always been a reference. I reference um other audio to a fault. Um, I was raised as like a reference great sounding tracks guy and not so much a meter guy. When I started under my dad, and all we had was the VUs. There's VUs, and there was no Duros, and no, if that's even how you say it, there was no loudness metering. And it was always just try to get it sounding like Usher Simple Things, if you're doing an R&B track. So I think the more powerful thing then, because there's not a lot that I gain from looking at meters other than checking things. If I finish a master I feel really good about, and it turns out that I have moments of -4, LUFS loudness, I'm like, maybe I went too far, you know. Um, but in many cases, using reference audio that sounds good in streams, I feel like our brains, trusting in our inherent intuition to compare and contrast and move towards known methods that work. Like we know, like for me, when I was younger, it was Usher Simple Things. I knew if I could get it at least close to that it was going to stream well. And that's kind of been my main approach up until this point when people became so hyper focused on loudness on Spotify. So I think we do need to, I would love to put out, for people to DM. I think we should have a place of this is one way we've gone about it. This is another way. Dale mainly references known audio. Pascal likes to do this and this, so that we can, begin to narrow and refine as a community a methodology that works, or at least options to try, because maybe sometimes one way or the other way is not the correct way for a given task at hand, and having a list of ways that have worked in certain circumstances can be beneficial.
Cool. Yep.
And one last thing before we open the floor up, just to discuss and have questions from one another. And I don't need to be the only one answering questions either. Because like I said, I have whatever expertise I have, and I have whatever knowledge that I have come to rely on and be confident of. But that doesn't make me anything than someone who has some expertise and an opinion. So please feel free, once we open the floor. Essentially, our first community experiment, and all have a written detailed set of instructions once I take community input. And please DM me with any recommendations. But what we're gonna do, it essentially goes like this. We're gonna take our own masters. Singles and albums are great. Both singles, EPs, and albums. We have our own masters that we know were the source files for Spotify. We know certain data points about them that we'll record, like true peak level, like we discussed. True peak level, it was final limited with this at minus 0.1, with FabFilter Pro L, you know. And we then what we're gonna do, and this requires a little bit of work on everyone's part, but basically we need a digital source to be able to record with Spotify. And so what I do is I set up a separate computer that has a digital out that I know is playing back at 0 unity. And I'll capture either a SPDIF or an AES stream straight into my mastering, and I will capture it digitally. You know, so I'll play back. It takes time. I play back the entire album or EP or single, and I capture it into my mastering software. Let me get rid of that. Okay. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. So I captured in my software, and then one other very important consideration, because we're talking averages of loudness, is we need to truncate the let's say we've recorded an album. We need to chop the album to start and finish exactly where the wave masters started and finished, so the time is exactly the same. Then we export the whole wave master of our masters, and we export the whole Spotify capture. We import it into Isotope RX, and we read the, you know, we get our loudness by analyzing the whole file. Obviously your masters will probably be around minus 10 for an album, and then the Spotify master should be at minus 14, but what I think you'll find is that it's not at minus 14 at all. And that is what we're trying to collect data on. It's very important that we all use the same measurement software. Right now, I did have someone reach out with measurement software. We'll see if that can work for the community and for these experiments. I was just going to roll with RX, so I'll update us on that if we have some sort of tool that's available community-wide for free, because that would be the best, as opposed to everyone who wants to be a part needing RX, Isotope RX, even though it is kind of the tool for the moment. And then what we'll do is, you know, we probably won't air people's dirty laundry, like this isn't, you know, this Spotify release is low, it's Pascal's master or Dale's master, and it's a dB low, you know, because that could really create some issues. But we could just create pseudonyms for each of the things we've captured, and then I'll keep a you know, a private list of what things actually are, so we can refer back. And then we can begin to see, you know, once we get 30, 50 releases deep, if things are as Spotify say they are, and then we can, you know, move forward from that data set. Is there anything that I should take into consideration? Anything I'm missing or question? I know I haven't written down for you guys, but guys and girls, but you know, please let me know. You know, if you have any recommendations there or any questions.
That all sounds great.
Very cool.
I had one.
Yes, go ahead.
I have one little question. Is there any interest in looking at the difference between normalized and unnormalized on Spotify? And is the unnormalized version that's coming out of Spotify actually the same as what you sent?
I would think that's actually a fantastic that's a fantastic point. We could open that up for community. I would say yes, eventually. I mean, I think part of what this is trying to inspire is for us to look into our own work. So absolutely you should do that. Does that fall within the scope of this immediate question? I'm not sure, because I do want to, at a later date, pardon me, I need to go on a do not disturb. I'm getting blown up. Never mind. I'll leave it. Pardon me. Too many things just flashed on my screen. I would say that that would fall within the next, my next, if I look here, my next thing would be, after normalization, I would like to look into quality concerns in terms of the actual stream quality of Spotify, as well as take into consideration sample rate specific considerations. So if you released a 96K master and you're in Spotify streaming at 44.1, it certainly will sound a lot crappier, because it's live sample rate converting your file on the spot to get it down to 44.1. By how, I don't know, but I know it doesn't sound good. So we do need to look into that for sure. I'm just not sure if it falls within this particular normalized loudness segment, or if it would fall within the sound quality. But if you have the time to run it normalized and non-normalized, so we're future proof, that's a great idea as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm wondering, are people sending multiple mastered versions of songs when you send out the final delivery? Like for me, I normally get a track like as a reference. I always ask people, "Hey, can you send me your reference master for me to beat, really?" And those are always at like -0.2 as a ceiling. And if I send them something back and there's a ceiling of like -1 or something like that, I would have to compress the song so much to beat theirs. So I always send a -0.2 ceiling version to beat theirs out so that there's a fair comparison. And then when I do a final delivery, I send one with a compensated output ceiling for a streaming version. And I'm wondering, are other people doing that? Or is it just like, here's the master, and then you like send whatever you do?
Yeah, I feel like that is I feel like there is a little wiggle room that the labels give us in the parts order, because they do request, ADM files. So that's essentially a quieter version
Sorry,
with more
ADM?
headroom. What was that?
Sorry, you ADM? What was that that you
Oh,
said?
Apple
It's
Digital
Atmos.
Master.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so or it was previously known as InFit, and now it's known as an Apple Digital Master, which is really confusing because Atmos has the ADM BWF, which is for Atmos. But InFit, ADM are basically a version, your master but lower to provide Apple's certification, so that you're not blowing up Apple's codec. And so I do feel like there is wiggle room for us to be able to provide these things after approval. And normally it doesn't bite you in the butt, but I have had instances. I have had one particular instance where I had a client who could hear dither on his mix. He worked on this track for like 2 years, and he could hear anything. You could breathe on the track and he would know it's different and not like it. So um when we released it, he did hear that on Apple that it wasn't the same, and all I did was turn it down half dB. So all that to say, it can bite you in the butt with someone who's heard something probably too much and is probably a little too fine-tuned in. But I've never, in normal cases, had that be a problem, because it's what the label is requesting. Yeah, the label wants an ADM master, and for an ADM master to be an Apple Digital Master, it needs to have more headroom, or a Spotify master. They're asking for the same thing.
My question though is like, that's all good info, but I'm just wondering, like, community wide, are other people delivering multiple masters on final delivery or just one file?
I would
I'm
say
one file
multiple.
here.
Cool. Who was that?
This is Edsel. Hi, everybody. I'm
Hey,
Edsel from
Edsel.
Nashville, mastering engineer.
Pleasure to have you here, man.
I'll do a few masters, Taylor.
Taylor. Cool.
Yeah.
For me, typically it's the one, but when labels request a parts order with multiple, with like a specific request for that, I'll provide it. Are there any sneaky mastering engineers out there who do things without their clients knowing? Providing small amounts of headroom for codecs?
One thing I don't know if this actually has an impact on loudness playback, but going from like a verse to a chorus or like the last chorus out, I'll often automate the headroom by half a dB just to make it feel bigger. I don't know if anyone else has seen results with that, but clients are usually happy. So that's one thing I'll do.
That's cool.
No, that's a good play. Yeah, Dale, thanks for doing this, by the way, getting us all together and doing the
Absolutely.
thing. The thing's already working because, like you said, if the goal is for us to examine our own work, I'm already sitting here like, oh man, I wonder if title is actually right. Like lossless title, is it right? I don't know. We'll find out. But we'll report back. But yeah, I was gonna say I'm curious about the things that have been mentioned, the normalized versus not normalized versus Spotify hitting 14 or not. But the other thing I'm curious about is like where everyone's landing on true peak ceilings, and seems like that's going to be part of the documentation process, which is smart because it's crazy. I'm sure we've all experienced if you run a master through RX with a few different limiters, even with the same true peak air quote settings, things can actually come out really different when you analyze it. So yeah, sometimes I run stuff at like minus 0.3. Sometimes I feel like I sneak stuff up as high as I can just to see what happens when it comes out like a minus 0.1 or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious about those things, and yeah, excited to learn more with you all.
Yeah, the ceiling thing is crazy. When you're really pushing up against trying to beat, the loud mix, like like I always try to release things around minus 0.2, but sometimes I got to just let that go. If I'm doing a master that's like minus 6 integrated or something, every 0.1 dB of loudness could be the difference between you getting fired and someone else getting hired. I mean, that's the truth. When we get down to the real where everyone's eyes are on, from the artist all the way to the CEO of a label, 0.1 dB could be the difference between you keeping the job and not. And so it is very important. And whether or not true peak limiting, I know for a fact taking off true peak limiting leads to much quicker, in my experience, I'll say, leads to much quicker approvals because you're limiting less. Essentially, it's only limiting what it needs to keep it between, but under the actual ceiling as opposed to the imaginary ceiling. And I've learned that my masters more often than not sound better non-true peak limited in the wave world. But the one thing I would love to really know is what sounds better once streaming. And once we have a collective of good information on that point, we can point people to, hey, this non-true peak limited wave sounds better now, but take a look at this document that will tell you how much better it'll sound if we true peak limit with a proper ceiling once it's on Spotify.
Yeah, that's all super cool to think about. I would also be curious about if we're running actual true peak ceilings or if we're kind of oversampling to the point. I mean, I guess it's kind of all the same, but if there's a difference in those two things too, I guess there's an endless amount of things we could investigate with all that. But yeah, I'm sure we've also all experienced that if you download the current #1 song or the top 5 and you check them out, they are usually all going above 0, which is kind of interesting, even if you can get to the lossless, not always. So yeah, something to consider.
Yeah, I found that when I go in, because I go to HD Tracks all the time because I want to see the actual masters, and you can see which sample, they provide you with multiple sample rates, and you can always tell which is the original sample rate it was mastered at because it won't have additional anytime something's sample rate converted, and I'd love to go into this as a community. Anytime something sample rate converted, the math creates overs. And so, you know, maybe the 44, maybe the 96K master was minus 0.2 headroom, but on the sample rate converted master, it's just smashed to 0 with true peak, you know, true peaks out the wazoo.
Damn, bro, can't trust anything.
Can't. But that's definitely something to look into as well. You know, for me personally, I'll throw this out there for whatever it's worth. Working mainly in R&B and pop, I've had to let go of oversampling and true peak limiting in most of my limiting, because it gets in the way of the transients too much. People really want their drums to slap like they are in the mix, which was not true peak limited, you know, which was, you know, ceiling of 0, and maintaining that is of the utmost importance in a lot of the work that I do.
Yes.
So some of you guys are,
Sorry.
oh, sorry, someone else. I've been
Oh,
asking.
go ahead. I was just going to echo the same thing.
Cool.
So are people delivering masters that are not set to true peak on their limiters?
Every day.
I
Wow.
am. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, true peak limiting it's not even true peak. That word true peak is not true at all. It's a potential. It should be, I know this isn't as fancy sounding, but it should be called potential peak. Because basically what you're doing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just making a cheeky joke, which I'll refrain from during our official Zoom meeting here. Sorry.
I love it. I love it. I need to know what you were going to say. But it's really potential peak, because what it's doing, and I could be, you know, this is the information that I have. But true peak is basically in when you play back this 44.1 file somewhere else with a hi-fi converter, a lot of times converters with multiple potential sample rates will always upconvert 1x masters, which are 44.1 or 48, to the highest potential sample rate of the converter, which obviously that creates distortion if you don't have any headroom. So true peak, basically what it's doing is it's limiting earlier and creating, even though it's not creating ceiling headroom, it's taking into account the certain playback environments where upsampling would happen and distortion would happen as a result of your master being upsampled. So essentially it's limiting more to prevent distortion in more places, but that really comes at the cost of punch, and it comes at the cost of fidelity in a lot of cases.
Got it.
Many times I've also had the experience of like the measurement of LUFS being kind of a fallible thing, in the sense of tiny moves that I wouldn't expect to have much impact on the integrated loudness having crazy impacts. And the one that was the craziest was actually yesterday, so it was just in time for this. I was mastering a track that came in. It came in hot at negative 9.2. And after very minimal processing, one being it was like a dB and a half cut at 300, and a little bit of excitement. The integrated afterwards, the master was clearly slightly louder, but was integrated negative 11.2. It's just like a wild difference, which I'm like, oh, I guess that's great. I mean, it's going to be turned down a little bit less now.
That's huge.
While also sounding the same, but I'm like, I don't know how I did it. I don't know how to redo it again. I'll just save that chain as a preset. Who knows? But there's
Got
also
everything at 300.
Yeah, right. There's also the idea of LUFS as a measurement being incredibly fickle on in like small ways as well.
Absolutely. Not to mention, Rory wanted me to mention to everyone, it just like True Peak is, as Edsel was, is that how you pronounce your name, Edsel?
Yes.
Wonderful. I
Totally.
just wanted to make sure I wasn't butchering it. Feel like an a-hole, if I did that. Just as Edsel was mentioning the different the differences in plugins, true peak limiting, they they differ varying based on different kind of filtering and is slightly different measurements. LUFS is the same. If you measure if you have master check on your, if you're using master check, it's going to measure LUFS differently than RX. It's going to measure differently than Pyramix. It's going to measure differently than, all these different things measure LUFS a little bit differently. And I think that is due to just a little bit of wiggle room in that standard, that the standard gives to different manufacturers. But there can be as much as a half dB, difference between integrated measurements based on whatever software someone is using.
Just a question, if it's all right, Dale.
Yeah.
Are you often or frequently with any frequency when you're competing with these mixes, are you sending stuff out that if you were to render your master and throw it in RX and analyze it, is it like, plus 0.75 over 0 on true peak, or are you like really staunch about?
I ignore the true peak on RX in cases where I'm competing with a mix engineers, because too often I can't. If I listed the jobs that I lost, I mean, I would start to cry about it again for the like fifth time, because I used to be a staunch true peak limited, make sure it's correct. I'm the mastering engineer. I'm supposed to make sure it right. What that has cost me in terms of projects that ended up moving on elsewhere because I had this idea that I had to do a thing is I mean, it's a long list. And so finally I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to care about that number. It sounds great. I'm sending it out even though my true peak, I've had masters of the true peak was plus 2.5. Like, and because that's just a potential calculation. It does come into play, and I'm not saying it doesn't matter, because it does, but I would say keeping the opportunity that you work so hard for is more importantly than a potentially fictitious number. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's super good advice. Thanks. I sometimes get scared if it's at like 1.3 or 1.5. I think, oh shit, I need to get it below 1 or whatever. But yeah, that seems like a healthier mindset. Like fuck that number.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is you'll find when you actually go in RX and you find where that one point is, the most of the file could be with that 1 point removed. Maybe the true peak is only plus 0.4. It's just on one mathematical moment where it hits that 1.3 in the left channel for 0.02 milliseconds.
Yeah, it's true.
So it does that's one thing that there used to be and I think it still exists, but there used to be a tool set that Maple gave us, and it would not only give us the true peak values, but it would tell us how long it's clipping. So you could kind of gauge like, oh, the true peak's 1, but it's there for less than a millisecond, as opposed to, wow, that's 100 milliseconds totally clipped. And you were able to use those figures to your to your advantage.
I think there might be something tied between the true peak level and how the music gets transcoded. And so like whatever the true peak number that gets registered, I think gets fed into whatever transcoding algorithm is there to calculate yeah, at least like in round trip AAC, like how many points get sorry, I'm not doing a good job explaining myself. Like how much of the track clips. Sorry, I'm having trouble explaining myself. I think that this
no, it's
peak
clear.
number factors into how much it gets turned down when it gets normalized or when it gets transcoded. So you might be able to get something louder. I don't know for certain by just making sure you don't clip transcoding and like getting the highest possible value underneath whatever that transcoding value is. No, or I don't know. Maybe you have an opinion on this.
I would imagine, and I think I'm gonna guess that I think you're correct when we go and we look at the data that we collect, I would imagine that true peak limited masters end up being turned down less because of that exact transcoding distortion, and that so in the normalized world, and it's always a take, I mean, it's a give and take sort of thing. So the normalized master ends up being louder when it's true peak limited, but then the final, the non-normalized master ends up being quieter. So it's kind of like a give and take. But I would imagine that's correct, that distortion, that's one of my what is it called, hypothesis, um hypothesi, I don't even know how to say that in plural, but that's one of my hypotheses, is that the reason that project that I was working on was at minus 15.1 is because the project as a whole was not true peak limited, and something in the transcoding process caused clipping, which caused additional uh, uh, amounts to be turned down on that particular album.
Kind of going off of that, I haven't tested this myself, but a lot of artists that I work with, let's say they have like a 5-song EP, but they release each of those 5 songs as a single under Spotify. So when it comes to them inevitably releasing the album as a whole under the same ISBN numbers, all those singles are going to be on the album. So does Spotify, because Spotify album normalizes, not track, correct? I think I remember that correctly.
So Spotify, as when an album's a proper album, it will not change interrelations between songs. It's supposed to move a project up and down together. So once the EPs, if the singles are brought under an EP together, it will not, it will not change their relative volumes together like that. But I have had cases where I mastered something, and then another mastering engineer mastered a few, and the EP, and they're still up that way, are just all over the place, and no one has any idea why that's the case. So I have had personal issues with singles being packaged into an EP personally, where there's no reason, but the volumes are all over the place and not what they should be.
Spotify thinks of those singles as an album in itself, right?
Mm-hmm. And then if the on certain platforms, and I don't think this is Spotify, I think this is more Apple Music. If people are playing from one EP through another EP through another EP, the EP gets a 1 score. But say you pluck one song and you put it in a playlist, they don't operate off the EP normalization, they operate off of the single normalization. So there are, at least on Apple Music, I'm sure it has a single integrated volume that is used in playlists when the single is used, and then there's an EP or LP integrated volume when people are listening album to album or EP to EP.
I wonder if there's any data on how many people have normalized turned on versus off, just in Spotify.
That would be an amazing piece of information to know. I'm also going to try to get up on our data sheet, or whatever we call it, what is normalized and what is not. I know smart TVs for sure are not normalized. But other streaming, we'll have to find out what has the potential to be anything coming from a cell phone or a computer has normalization as a option. I think it's also important to note here. I see that in the chat it's on by default. Yeah, it is on by default. I'm just seeing chats there, by the way. Let me just pick that up just in case there's something Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. I missed a bunch of messages here, but the one thing
We've
that I
been talking shit the whole time. Don't look at
nice.
it.
This sucks. Um, the one thing that I do want to say, if I didn't lose my train of thought, normalization, indifferent, it'll come back to me. But I did have one additional thing. Oh, so a lot of times, people will say, it sounds bad on Spotify. One other really important question is, what version of Spotify are you using? Are you paying for Spotify? Or are you using the free version that has the lowest possible, data stream available? So I just want to put that out there. There are different data, different levels of data coming from, whether it's the free version, whether it's the, fully paid version, and those definitely come into play in terms of apparent loudness, normalization, and sound quality.
How do you feel about the title? They have that service that's like extra money, and you can get the highest tier. Do you notice like a huge difference? Is it worth it?
I use the high, I believe the highest tier. It sounds good. I'm not going to say, it sounds, title from my experience, it sounds really, really good. When I listen to masters, I mean, you could deep dive and maybe really hear the differences, but when I've done with a project, when I'm done with a project on title, and I've spent maybe 2 weeks mastering a thing, and I know the ins and outs of everything on that album, and then I go and listen on title, it sounds relatively familiar, which is huge to me, and that's why I trust it. I mean, it might not be the greatest thing, and I also have some specific questions about, they have that shoot, what is it called? It's their high fidelity wrapper package. 1 second.
I think it's called Max.
Max and sorry guys.
There it is, MQA.
MQA. Yes.
Yeah, Connor just shouted it or said it in the chat. Yeah,
Awesome.
I was confused about like, because I go through DistroKid with some artists, and like they don't really explain it, and that's probably a DistroKid thing. But yeah, Max and MQA. Like, should we be listening at the highest, or are we trying to do like a relative, like maybe take the highest and then the shitty free version of Spotify and see the average of that?
I think
know.
the differing, I think it would definitely be good, for those that have time to look into what it sounds like on both, now back to Spotify, what it sounds like on a free stream as opposed to what all the paid users are getting. I think this would be very valuable information, especially on our second kind of thing when we're looking into sound quality specifically. There's a plugin that lets you preview how it would sound in the different platforms. Yeah, it's called, there's one called Master Check. And it helps, it not only allows you to listen through the Spotify codec, but it also allows you to listen at the volume that they think it'll be at, which also has a, a deviation from what will be. It's plus or minus about a dB. I have had success listening through Spotify, their spot version of the Spotify codec, and making adjustments. And I think it was with a very Spotify focused artist or producer, I think it's a powerful tool to be able to listen through that codec and make brightness and especially low mid adjustments to kind of counteract the sound of Spotify's codec. Noah. Yeah. And as back to titles, MQA, my personal opinion is that this is no shade to MQA, because they're doing some really cool things. Like MQA can package 96K into a 44.1 WAV file, so you could play 96K from a CD. There's a lot of cool things about it, but I will say that from my experience of deep listening on MQA, I prefer the sound of the wave. And I even prefer the sound of the the non MQA masters. But that's just me, and it's really getting into the weeds in terms of sound quality. One person might like it, one person might prefer the other. It certainly doesn't sound bad.
I'm wondering, is anyone changing what they're doing after this conversation?
It's a good question.
I'll do
Yeah,
some
I'm not gonna
experimenting.
stress when I see a true peak over 0.
Love it.
Nice.
Might peep that that codec. What was it? Master the Mix. That really accurate Spotify codec plugin. I use True Balance and True Level. If you guys ever heard of that, it's Sonable, and they have a bunch of them.
Awesome.
Is it Sonable? Yeah, but
I'm going to go through this, by the way, afterwards and kind of write. I'm unable to make notes at the moment because I have Zoom open, but I'll go through and pull all these things down for everyone. Hopefully this is recording properly too, so we can all benefit from it later if we need to find something that was said. Thank you for those recommendations. Noah mentioned, is it okay to send 48K files to streaming delivery? For Atmos, I would say yes, because it's the only sample rate, but I fight people to the gill when they want a high res master, because I know I have a lot of trauma. I love high resolution audio. I love 192. I love 96. What I do not love is uploading high res masters or even 48K masters, but everyone's streaming it at 44.1, because that is one of the easiest ways to have masters not sound right. Because most everyone's systems and phones and everything forces to 44.1 currently. So unless you have a high resolute, a $10,000, streaming music player that's moving sample rates as the songs come in, everything's just getting SRC'd with a crappy SRC before it's getting played back. Always better for you to do it at 44.1. It's best to master. I would recommend, my personal recommendation is to master at 44.1. Other people have differing opinions. I would limit at 44.1 so that the final thing that happens to that file is limit and dither. And then you have a 44.1 file that is limited at 44.1. If you master at 48K, you limit at 48K, then you sample rate convert, you're going to have additional distortion from the sample rate conversion and compound your problem streaming. Although it is better if you have a choice between you sample rate converting a master and Spotify sample rate converting a master, put it in RX and do it yourself.
I got
Just to
another
be
question.
clear, Dale, you would do that before all of your limiting. The first thing you would do is sample rate convert it.
Yeah, so if in when I'm doing analog mastering, I play it back at the original sample rate, and just the analog process takes care of the conversion. In most cases, when I'm doing digital only mastering, the first thing I do is sample rate convert the master. That doesn't always fly with people. Sometimes I have to master. Sometimes if I need to keep it 96, I'll do all my mastering at 96K. And then before making the 44.1 master, I'll remove the final limiter. I'll print the 32-bit master at 96K, and then I'll sample rate convert that and then do the final limiting at 44.1 in cases where, every little thing counts.
I got another question. Sorry, I'm asking so many questions here.
No, it's fun. It's great.
Thanks for doing all this, by the way. So you mentioned that you most of the time, or that every day you're sending out masters that are not set to True Peak. Are you ever sending out any masters that are set to True Peak? And when you do deliver Apple Digital masters, do you ever do those without True Peak?
Typically speaking, I do some True Peak limit in my main template. I'm True Peak limiting. I typically take it off, but I always listen because sometimes it sounds better on. Sometimes it always has some sort of a smoothing effect to the transients, and sometimes transient impact is not my number one goal, you know. So sometimes it does sound better, and I'll do it that way. In cases where, you know, Apple Digital Masters is not a total afterthought, and I don't need to make them in 5 seconds. Due to them being in the afterthought, True Peak Limiting always works better there, because the reason we're creating the additional headroom is specifically for the codec, which benefits from True Peak Limiting always.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Let me read this. Connor, what if most masters on streaming is at 4896K? Is it still being down samples? I know Tidal and Apple Music will stream at higher sample rates even off the iPhone. Is it down sample still? There are cases. We are finally entering into an era where more devices are streaming at higher sample rates. And it isn't clear always, and there's really not a lot of tool sets other than seeing what your DAC is set at, or your sound card, or if you're on a computer, you can clearly see what is being streamed. When you're on a phone, there's no way to know what the native sample rate of the phone is at. So we're relying off very gray data. Luckily, when we're listening on our phone, sound quality, it takes sort of a back seat a little bit, because normally we're streaming our phone to our car, streaming it to some Apple earbuds, both much lower resolution ways of listening than if we were listening in our studio. So it's we don't know on the phone specifically, other than what they've told us, and they have told us that the phone can technically do multiple sample rates. Will Apple ever let us really, really know? I'm not sure. But if you're hearing distortion on your 96K master that you delivered, that is novel to your ear, it could be due to sample rate conversion that is happening pre it hitting your phone. And Connor said I'm started leaving my masters at whatever the native sample rate is, the mix, yeah, whatever it's, and that a lot of people do that, and there's a lot of reasons to deliver your masters at the highest possible sample rate, especially future proofing, especially when we are in a place where higher sample rate streaming is more accessible in the general public. For me personally, bad sample rate conversion in any scenario trumps the small 1 or 2% impact we're going to have from streaming higher sample rate master. So I'm currently at 40-for-1, and I might be Don Quixote, fighting my last battle or whatever, but I'm still on 40-for-1 in most cases, unless I'm doing a HD track specific release. I'm not sure where everyone else is on that thing, but I know a lot of people really, really benefit from the sound quality of mastering at higher sample rates.
What about obtaining that lossless badge in Apple? Don't they require you to submit a 4824?
They don't. They haven't made me yet. I mean, I'm a little bit, because of my age, a little bit of an OG infit dude. I got my badge like really, really early. So I don't know if they're just putting up with me, but I've never had something kicked back. And I only do 40-for-1 infits. It technically 40-for-1 is still within their specification as far as I know. There was a day in and I'll just put a little story. There was a day when you did an Apple Digital mastered for iTunes master. An engineer from Apple would email you the converted audio to listen to it and approve it before it went on iTunes. That lasted for like a minute, but that was a fun little time period. Felt very official.
Why don't they release the codec like as a third party plugin? Like, do they just not want us to have the tech? Like, don't they want us to to give them stuff that makes sense? I don't know.
It is
do.
released.
Search for Mastered for iTunes tools, and you will find
Okay.
something called the Apple Music Droplet, and you drop the file on there, and it makes a file for you, and it's pretty darn accurate.
Thank you.
I'm not. It might tell you that doesn't work on modern machines, but there are also, you can find in forums how to hack the file set a little bit to work on your whatever machine you have. Aidan said, I wonder if, as a mixer, mastering engineers would be happier if I could help the final ceiling in the mixing process be a little lower, whatever that entails me doing. Do you think it would be a good goal to have, just so mastering engineers aren't fighting too much for that little extra loudness and risking too many peaks over zero, or do you not really care? I think anytime we cannot, and I want to open this up to everyone else, anytime we can fight for a little bit more headroom, it's a good fight as long as it doesn't cost you the job. If you have a big opportunity, and you're new to a camp, and you got to just do whatever you got to do to make your place in that camp. Don't go on some ceiling escapade, your first time working with, say you get a shot at working with Ariana Grande. Don't be like, the ceiling's got to be a particular way, because no one's, you might, that might be your last stand on that particular project. But in a case where you have a rapport with the client, you have a rapport with the artist, when you have some wiggle room to do what you know to be technically correct, that's always a excellent thing to do, is to provide a little bit more headroom, a little less loudness, and let mastering kind of set that final precedent. And if your mix isn't as loud, I'm not going to be as concerned, and maybe others won't be as concerned, of making it the loudest thing possible. Does anyone else have input on that point?
I agree 100%. Headroom's good. But I don't often find myself like upset if a mix is loud, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Aiden, cool thought for sure.
I like that, Edsel, because it's like, there was a time when mastering engineers were crusty when they got loud mixes, and I never understood that, unless it was, just slammed and ugly. But I'm glad, the new, our kind of newer, younger gen is not like, we need all the peak, we need, dynamics and all this stuff. Like, I like getting loud mixes, because the mixer and the producer and the artist, they knew what they wanted.
Yeah, it feels. Oh, so sorry, Dale.
That's okay. Go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
it feels like a good time to say that, often I don't know what it's like for Dale, but for me, it's like, here's a mix, and then here's a mix without my final loudness or whatever. And I end up, I don't know, whatever. Sometimes it's better to work from the loud one, right? Like, if you listen to the two and you make the judgment call about the trade-offs and this and that and the other, and how much they exactly, like Dale said, nailed what they wanted. So in that case, Aiden, loud is good, so I don't know, both sides.
Definitely a lot of like nuanced. Any conversation I'm a part of, I love the nuance. I'm very anti A or B, yes or no. So very good answers.
How loud were those Gex mixes?
The Gex mixes were loud.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
No, it's okay. They were loud, and I mean that's just their sound, clipping mix buses and just that's part of the thing. So it's like, and in that case, uh, eh, I just lean into it. Like I just throw my mastering engineer hat into or I just throw caution to the wind and just go for it. It's the same thing with there was a hip hop album I did that's probably the loudest thing I ever did, and it was just, you know, so stinking loud. And I was just like, all right, this rock and roll, let's go.
Are you doing like more damage control at that point and kind of just, or are you just, I guess, flowing it? Yeah.
I'm just going into it. Like if the album all sounds blown out, that's the sound of the day. And the only thing that I am careful of at that point is that if I have another project that day, is that I reset. I like to be a chameleon in a sense. Like if something sounds crazy, like let's keep it crazy. I mean, unless someone's like, "Hey, this sounds crazy, make it not crazy." Yeah, OTT. Very tons of OTT.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other input there?
That's kind of what I was getting at with the whole Max Martin song structure thing of like they have it dialed into a certain point where you're not hearing what is hitting the meter, but it still has an effect and it hits the Spotify encoder just right so that it really maximizes the potential of the track. I think it'd be cool to analyze Servant's mixes. I personally, when I've analyzed them, they're still super bright. But again, I probably can't hear, you know, the 2K that he's cutting off of the top. Maybe I can. I don't know. I haven't checked in a while.
Edsel said, yeah, pretty sparse 15K and up. Mids over everything mindset reminds me of Noah said reminds me of the 16K boost, 28K roll off thing. Yeah. A lot of times like when people were cutting vinyl, they had to cut all that stuff anyway. In fact, I used to try to send high res to vinyl, like 96K audio to vinyl cutting, and it would piss off the cutting guys because they were used to 44.1 masters, and 96K had a bunch of useless information over 20K that they had to, they'd get into a cut and some blast at 50K would ruin their cut. So like stop it. Stop send me 44.1, they would say. So I think it's just become a sound, just like 16-bit was a sound, 24-bit is a sound, and having that roll off. There's something there. One other thing that I could relate to this is I used to be more regular. There's a group here in town called it's an audio engineers group. Shoot, the name's escaping me right now. I'll have to see if I can remember it. But I used to be part of an audio group, and one thing that was related there is that a lot of times it's not that your brain is just not processing it, like you're just not cognizant that you're hearing audio over 20K. But one of the guys there was saying that everything over 20K just sounds like 20K or highest perceivable um over your highest perceivable frequency. So if your highest perceivable frequency, anything, if it's 18K, 25K, your ear still perceives it. Your brain is just truncating everything to your highest perceivable frequency, which is also an interesting thing because a lot of times we get headaches, over super high frequencies, and we might not even be knowing we're being, we're not even hearing. We don't even know what we're hearing. We just know we have a headache, from a particular mix or something. So that was geeky.
Are you talking about Meta Lines?
Not Meta Alliance. Let me. I could look it up right now. It's It's an old school,
AES.
not Michael Boddicker. Right now it's Sapphire Group, and this group of it's a lot of it used to be run by Aspen Pittman, who did Groove Tubes until he passed. God rest his soul. But people like Havana Manley are part. It's an open group if you guys ever want to go. It's really cool. It's a lot of people who have been here since the days of like early vinyl.
Like a Facebook group or what kind of group?
It's they meet. It's Sapphire. Let me find the website so I can share it.
I think it's Hollywood Sapphire Group, isn't it?
Oh, yes, yeah, because there's a New York chapter as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you search Hollywood Sapphire Group, it's an open group and it's just got a bunch of like amazing, mostly older engineers. I don't want that to seem disparaging, but like a lot of legends, we'll say, of the craft. A lot of guys who would know how to fix a tape machine and know how to cut vinyl and know how to do a lot of things that we might not know how to do. In fact, when I was let into the group, I talked about loudness because you have to in order to join the group officially, you have to do like a presentation to the group. And when I tried to make the case that loudness wasn't necessarily a bad thing, I got a lot of sneers and murmurs in the room. It was great. Well, I really appreciate you all joining with me. This was awesome, just to get to see your faces, to be able to talk. I look forward to I'll work. If you have any recommendations, if there was anything, I am really trying to community source right now as much as I can, and I'll do my best as things get busy and as, I'm just going to do my best to take as much input as possible. Always feel free to DM me. Email me. We're kind of a small group. I'm Dale at beckermastering.com if you ever want to reach out to offer your input or anything. I definitely, if you have anything you want to add to the real next thing we want to do is to get some masters tested. And so as I'm working on that methodology and the PDF that'll have all the instructions, I would love your input if you have it. I would also love to take any input you have otherwise, and we'll just slate it in for, if something's for the future, we'll slate it in for the future. If it's for now, we'll do it now. And I just really appreciate you all taking the time. It meant a lot to me that so many people came and talked and, want to get involved.
This definitely needed. This is definitely needed. I just remember just getting into engineering, and I always had a conflict with trying to find a mastering engineer to have a conversation with. It just seemed out of the tradition. It was always just send the mix and this is what you get. And there was no like dialogue of even true peak. I know that's a relative new thing, but this is just, I think it's absolutely needed to bridge the gap in conversation of engineer to mastering to Atmos to whatever they throw out. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And what's really cool about this is there's, maybe 10 mastering engineers on this call, and it's so cool we can all kind of cross-pollinate, kind of a mastering engineers can be very opinionated. I guess I'm opinionated too, but you can really get a very cross-pollinated view and a very all-encompassing view because there's so many of us here. So I really appreciate that.
I'm
Yeah,
stoked.
Is anyone
Awesome. Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you, Edsel.
is anyone here going to be at NAM? Maybe we could meet up and go judge loudness talks together.
That's awesome.
That'll be
I'm gonna
great.
try to make it Thursday and Friday if anyone's there. I can put a let's touch base on that, Pascal. Maybe we could do a meetup or a lunch or a coffee or a beer or 7 beers. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, the more the merrier. Not more people, more beers. No, I'm just
More
kidding.
beers.
Maybe yeah, I don't know, and I'm happy to help you set this up, Dale, but a lot of people I know are on Discord. If there's like a Discord chat, or what's it called? So it's an S. But I don't know if you wanted to like create an email list or keep things over Instagram, because obviously more and more people are going to join this group without a doubt, and just so that you're not taking all of the weight of the burden of the names coming in. And
Yeah, is Discord good for everyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to reboot my old crypto Discord.
yeah,
Back in the 2020 boom when I was investing in shit coins and
I'm gonna take off, but thanks so much, Dale, and for everyone else coming here.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Eric. Well, we'll have to do that. Pascal, let's do that. I'll hit you up. I'll hit you up this evening once I've had a chance to do dinner and let's make one together if you don't mind helping me with that.
100%. You got it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm going to end it here, and feel free
Thanks,
to reach out.
Dale.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Dale. Take care.
See you, Rob.
Take care, everyone.
Peace.
Peace.